Welcome to episode 5 of the Do It Anyway podcast with Maria Redman. I'm your host, Maria Redman, and I'm here to take you on this journey of all things fitness, nutrition, health, and mental wellness. I want to thank you for being here with me today and enjoying another episode this week with me. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes already, be sure to go check them out on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. So, this week's episode is extremely important and near and dear to me. It is June. It is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And before I get into our topic today, I just want to go ahead and send out a little bit of a tribute to a good associate of mine, Douglas Fouché. He lost his life this weekend to mental illness, and it's tragic. And I just wanted to spotlight him for a moment. He was such a great and kind person, very giving of his time, a tremendous, amazing bodybuilder, amazing trainer. If you had any opportunity to come across any of his stuff on Instagram, I mean, you could just soak him up all day. He was just truly an amazing individual. So, this episode is going to be dedicated to Doug. I want to send my condolences and my love to his wife and his family and close friends. So with that, I'm going to get into this week's episode, and here we go. So we're talking about mental, wellness and how nutrition plays into that. I did a really huge deep dive on this topic because I'm of the mindset of Hippocrates. Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And so when I first got into nutrition and I heard that, it really kind of resonated with me. And it's always been something that I really kind of think about. And when I wanted to go ahead and talk about this topic of mental health, I really wanted to understand how much science has been done on this when it comes to nutrition and our brain. And I want to be quite honest and say I'm actually a little irritated with our education system. And let me tell you why. No one has taken time out in any of our education to tell us the importance of nutrients in our brain. Like, when have you ever heard anything talked about in our brain? We all learned about anatomy. We can tell you all the parts of the body. Even some of us can even go into the major, bones in the body. But none of us, for the most part, can really go into any degree of information on what happens in our brain and how that all affects everything. Our bodies are one kinetic chain, right? We love to break ourselves up into pieces and say my biceps, my quads, but really it's not like that. Our body is one systemic unit, and one thing will affect the next, will affect the next, will affect the next. So it's really critical that we have this information and education. And so I got to thinking to myself, I was like, well, maybe there's just not a lot of studies on nutrition and brain function. Maybe that's the problem, right? So I was like, let me just take a peek and look. And to my surprise, there is almost 3 decades of very solid, hard data on nutrition and diet specifically that affect mental health. Think about that. That is insane. 3 decades worth of pure, good, true scientific data on how our brains are affected. And this is not mainstream knowledge or news at all. And the constant thing is that everyone in the entire world eats food. Mind-boggling to me. So as I started getting into the study, I wanted to really see what does this mean for children? With all this data that I was looking at. And I was shocked to understand and find out that 3.2% of children and adolescents deal with depression. And I was like, well, now after reading these studies, and I'm going to get into them, what I know about food, that didn't seem so alarming. But what I did find alarming by far was that there were cases, a lot of cases of depression found in children as young as 2 years old. So it made me sit back in my chair and I'm like, okay, how can this be? Like, what is really going on here? Well, let me tell you what's going on. Let's start with infancy. Let's start with a baby all the way in the womb. And before I say that, let me say this. I hope that this podcast resonates with as many people as possible, especially if you are dealing with depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, PTSD, schizophrenia. I really hope that this podcast is helpful to you because I see a clearer path than just medication and therapy. And I don't think that you should not have medications. And I'm not saying don't go to therapy, but I'm also saying that there is a missing piece that you're not being told. And this is what you need to utilize to get you to a better state of health. So let's talk a little bit about infancy. When a baby's in the womb, unfortunately, the mom, we have to, nurture and nourish this baby. And aside from taking prenatal vitamins, if we're really being honest, as a mom, we're not even taught to eat well for the baby, to be honest. It's almost like a free ticket to kind of, for lack of a better word, be a pig with food. I mean, you hear all the stories about pickles and, wanting, burgers and fries and ice cream and all the garbage food that most pregnant women eat. And let me just say, if you're a young woman or a woman that's in your childbearing years looking to get pregnant, take this in too, because it is very important. What you're putting in your system is also, of course, going to the baby. And we know this, but we don't know how detrimental it is. So, baby's developing inside of the womb. We deliver the baby. The baby comes out, and a good chunk of women breastfeed. And if you can breastfeed, great. I was able to do it with my children. It is a beautiful experience, but also what's necessary. Every other mammal feeds their children their own milk. Some women can't breastfeed, and I'm very well aware of that. And so formula is the next best thing. But I also want to enlighten you that you can also buy breast milk from other mothers. It's okay to do. It's totally safe and totally fine. What seems odd to me now that I've gotten older is the fact that some people might say, ew, someone else's breast milk? Like, why would I do that? But no one ever says, ew, a cow's milk? Like, think about it. Or even fake chemicals, in a can of powder, like with formula. So it's not disgusting to utilize breast milk from other mothers to get those great key nutrients that babies really need. There's tons of women that donate it, and there's a lot of breast milk donation places. So if you're a mom looking and you want to do that and thought maybe this wasn't an option for you, it is. Aside from that, back to the baby. We're giving the baby either breast milk or formula, and this continues until the baby's ready to eat food. Baby's ready to eat some food, and we all go to the Gerber, baby food jars, and we're giving them smashed peas and apricots, which if you're a real mom, you know that you ate a lot more of those apricots than your baby did, because I ate many jars of baby food on accident. Not really. I was being greedy, and I loved the taste of it. It was really good. So if you know, you know. But we give them all this great, wholesome, good quality, whole food, fruits, vegetables. There was even smashed beef in there. And we gave them this up until about age 15 months. This is where I think the rubber meets the road. Now, if you were watching your infant in those early stages, a lot of parents would typically say things like, oh my gosh, my child is so intelligent. They're going to be so smart. And they're doing things, faster than their age. It's crazy. And then 15 months comes to 2 years, and that seems to slow down a bit. Well, what's changed in that time frame? We feed the kids differently. We start giving them French fries, slices of pizza, chicken nuggets, goldfish, Cheerios, you name it, just to name a few. We all know the convenience foods that we give the kids at this stage of life. And I get it. Moms, I get it. We're exhausted. We are just trying to survive. Some of us have not showered in days. I understand the struggle of a toddler is real. And if you've got more than one, it is extra real. So I get it. But I want you to take a moment and soak this in. Your child's brain is still developing from birth, well, in the womb, all the way up to about age 8 or 9. And now you've taken them away completely from nutrient dense foods. They are getting nothing but processed, high inflammatory foods in their diet. And we're expecting them to grow and learn well off of that. The brain just does not work that way. It's just not the way that it works. So, why is that? Your brain is an organ and it's highly metabolic and it has a very high demand for nutrients. Again, something no one ever tells you. I don't ever remember learning that in school. I learned this in nutrition class and it was kind of skated over. But yes, your brain is highly metabolic and it demands high nutrients, and it takes about 20% of your daily caloric intake. So roughly about 400 calories, depending on how much calories you eat, of course, for the brain to just function. And 60% of those calories are from fats. Your brain thrives off of some glucose, but omega-3 fatty acids. It is needed in the brain for things like making new neurons, synapses firing, the very things that help you blink your eyes, speak, walk, move. So it's critical. It's critical that you put in quality foods into your body for brain function alone. Devoid of this, there's going to be problems. And that's where we get into the studies. So there was a couple studies that I looked at. One study was done where they took high income to middle income countries and started tracking over a 12-year period their dietary trends. And why did they take higher income countries? Because they wanted to kind of diminish the social economic portion out of it and say, if we were looking at people who could afford better quality food, what is happening in their, in their nutrition with their brain when it comes to mental health in particular. Mental health. This is all on mental health study. Well, here's what they found. That in those middle class, countries, despite having the money, they all typically followed a Western diet. So the American, standard diet of highly processed foods. That's going to be your sodas, poor quality meats, all your processed foods, even in a lot of cases in this particular study, diet products. So they looked at all of that. And what they found in that study was the instances of depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and ADHD were 42% higher than in poorer countries. That's staggering. That is crazy when you really just take a moment and think about it, because here it is, you're talking about people that can afford better quality food, but because there's no education on true nutrition and how it affects the body, no one's going to think to purchase those foods. Even though they can afford it, they just purchase what they like and what's convenient and what's easy, because we've created a society that thrives off of convenience. That's how we've kind of set ourselves up. So even with money, you still are not ahead of the game when it comes to being better nourished than someone in a poorer country. So that kind of really hit home for me on how critical, diet and everything is to just feeling good. I mean, we all know sometimes we've eaten something and felt crappy, but it really does have a really true lasting effect on the body. So I just wanted to go ahead and point that out. In that study, that was kind of really, really key. When it comes back to the brain, your brain, as I mentioned before, it needs omega-3s, and that's going to come from high quality fatty fish, grass-fed beef, high quality, chicken, poultry, olives, olive oil, leafy greens. that is going to be some of the things that you're going to get better quality omegas from that you need. Your brain also needs something called B vitamins and folate. The B vitamins and the folate, without those, I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of things in the brain that can't work very well at all, especially your central nervous system. So in another study, they were looking at just having decreased levels of B vitamin and folate and how that affects mental health. And that was another staggering study. When those levels are low in the body, mental health also again showed a prevalence of almost 60%. 60% people. This is like, no wonder why all of us are like, I got to go get therapy. I mean, has anyone else kind of just noticed the trend lately these days? If you're looking enough on social media platforms, I mean, before there was a stigma about getting therapy, and I'm happy to see that it's now a thing to do, but everyone now is saying, I have depression, I have anxiety, I have bipolar disorder. Like, it's way more prevalent in society than it's ever been. And what has changed over the last 3 decades? Our food. We have put more processed foods on the market than any other time before, and they are pumped and pushed to us. I mean, from even if it's like a frozen meal, they're not healthy. They're full of all kind of craziness, but just to create convenience, because they know that now as humans we've become so lazy to take care of our vessel, we're going to buy it, not realizing that we're ruining our brains. Like, there is no way, knowing this information now, that we can expect to function well eating like this day in and day out, decade after decade after decade. No wonder why dementia and Alzheimer is on the rise. I mean, it has to be. Our brain is devoid of the nutrients that it needs to just survive. So it's going to be really critical that you're taking in proper nutrients. I looked at another study and it was talking about the Western diet versus the Mediterranean diet and its effects on mental health. Because once they got away from looking at studies of the income brackets, they started saying, okay, well, in poorer countries that follow more of a Mediterranean diet, is there going to be a difference between that and the Western? Well, 100%. Here's what they found. In a 12-year study done on this between the two nutritional protocols, again, the Western diet being highly inflammatory. They followed, by the way, 12,000 individuals in this study. So the one group had a Western diet, the other group had a Mediterranean diet. I think in that group, some had oils and some had more nuts in their diet. So it was a little bit of a variance just to kind of see, do the oils make a difference versus the nuts? Well, the Mediterranean diet reigns supreme. It was found that it is the key nutritional protocol that supplies the brain with every nutrient it needs to fire, to create all the synapses for, low inflammatory. Like, this was the diet that was the creme de la creme, whereas the Western diet created more instances, again, of depression, ADHD, anxiety. I mean, you name it, the Western diet, American diet failed just poorly. So if you are sitting here going through any type of mental health illnesses, and if you're not, but definitely if you already have it, and you're still struggling and you're on medication, I'm not saying come off of your medication. By no means am I saying that. And I'm not saying don't go to therapy. But I am saying that if you are struggling and you still have a poor diet, you have got to clean it up, because you're not even giving yourself, your brain, an opportunity to help assist with the medication or assist in the therapy that you're getting, because you're constantly keeping it in an inflammatory state. And it just can't work that way. It's just been proven now that it can't work that way. So it is going to be critical. I'm going to say it again quite a few times in this podcast. It is going to be critical that you put in the proper nutrients so that your brain can function. Your brain needs to be able to create new neurons on a constant basis. They die off as you go. They're always creating new ones. If there are no nutrients to create them, the ones that you have just are going to die off. And this is what they're finding now to be the leading cause of dementia and Alzheimer's. They still aren't quite as definitive, but this is one of the pathways that are definitely leading into those mental illness diseases. When it comes to depression, what they're finding is too much inflammation in the brain creates something called your BDNF serum levels to decrease. What is BDNF? It's your brain derived neurotropic factor. I know, big word. Try not to make it too sciencey. It's a chemical that is found in different parts of your brain that make your serotonin, your dopamine, your norepinephrine. It makes those neurotransmitters that you need, which is your mood regulations. When you have too much inflammation in the brain from eating highly inflammatory foods, your BDNF serum levels are severely decreased. And what happens? Yet again, depression skyrockets because you're not, the dopamine hits that you would get from things that would give you that, you're not experiencing any longer. Serotonin levels are critically low. That leads to a lot of instances of bipolar disorder. So there are a lot of different factors that go into, eating highly inflammatory foods. So we have to be very, very careful. I want to give you some tips on this. You might not be able to afford higher quality food, right? So if you can't afford grass-fed, start looking grass-fed beef, start looking for beef that, is low on hormones. Same thing with your chicken, right? You can't afford the high organic one, get no hormone added chicken. Start to get the array of colors in your fruits and your vegetables, mix it up, eat it. Season up your food, make it nice, use the different herbs to make it taste really good. Those play also a nice big role in giving your body key nutrients. Hydrate. We talked about this several times already, but hydration is going to be key so that it can shuttle the nutrients around through the brain. And this is going to be critical for helping with brain health. If there are no new neurons being built, I'm going to say it again, you're going to be in a world of trouble. Just the aging process alone, forget mental health for a moment. The actual aging process alone is not going to work out well. Your memory is going to suffer in a grand scale. Instances of brain fog is going to happen. So if you're having days sometimes when you're sitting at your desk and you're like, oh my gosh, I just can't think, stop a moment and think about what have you put into your body for the last 3 days? Like, has it been good or not? And I also want to stress this too in my fitness community where people tend to think that they are so healthy just because they look a certain way. I took time after going through some of these studies and I said, well, let me look at the bodybuilding space. Like here it is, like we look like, the pillar of health. But when I really started analyzing what a pretty standard bodybuilding diet looks like with men and women, I now know why a lot of us also suffer in the bodybuilding space with mental health as well. Because some of us do extremely well with the diet, but the majority of us are so restrictive on what we're eating because, hey, we're trying to get shredded, right? So we can't have everything in there. So we think. We eliminate a lot of the foods that contain the key nutrients. I mean, some people think that eating iceberg lettuce is so great for them. Well, iceberg lettuce has no nutrient value. Iceberg lettuce is great to be like a volume filler so that you feel more full, and it does add some water to your body, but literally that's about it. So even in the fitness space, our diets being so restrictive can lead to a whole world of issues for us mental wise. So we need to be very careful. I mean, it's critical, like extremely careful, and make sure that we are getting everything that we need in our diets. So that means like if you're a person that's dieting and you don't want to put fruits into your diet because you're scared of the sugar, which is just insane to me in some instances, but whatever. There's fruits powder, that you can mix in water and drink those that are devoid of the sugars. Then they also have greens powder as well. There's plenty of those on the markets. And this is for Gen Pop too. If you're a person that struggles with fruits and vegetables, start utilizing greens powder, fruits powders, so that you can get those key nutrients in, because the doctors are not going to tell you that you need to start implementing better nutrition in your body to heal yourself of these mental illnesses. And let me tell you why they're not going to tell you. You're probably going to think it's because they want you to get their prescription. And that's a piece of it. But the truth is, doctors, and I know this for a fact, they only go through 4 hours of nutrition, period. That's why doctors never recommend anything about nutrition. Their whole time from school all the way through residency, they have 4 hours on nutrition. It's very rare that you find an MD that goes outside of the bounds to take more nutrition classes to learn more. They just don't know. So they only know how to prescribe medications, which is a Band-Aid. They do not know how to prescribe nutrients for the body. So that's when you sit back and you just soak that in for a moment. We rely on doctors for our health, and they can't even manage to tell us what to do aside from giving us a pill. Literally, like they could not even give you a laundry list of foods to eat that would give you something as simple as vitamin D and K. They'd rather just give you a prescription for it so that you can get it in your system right now that way. But there's always a side effect of anything that you take. Like I always make this joke with people. They're always like, well, I'm going to take this. I'd rather take this prescription for this versus just trying to clean up my nutrition. And I'm like, okay, that sounds great. But if I've got eczema and they give me a pill to take for it and it causes me to have, leaky ass, like, is that like, do I really want to have that symptom? I'd rather just scratch my elbows. I'd rather just deal with the eczema. I don't want to have leaky ass and itchy elbows. Like it just doesn't add up. So we have to stop looking for these Band-Aids, and that's all doctors know to give us. So it's time for us to start empowering ourselves with knowledge so that we can start to do our part for our bodies to work alongside of what doctors can do and what therapists can do to make ourselves well. There's just really, no way around that. And that's what I've found looking at these studies. I mean, going back to children for a moment, when I was growing up, I would often wonder, like some kids are just innately very, very smart. I spent a lot of my time, not to toot my own horn, but I spent a lot of time in gifted classes. And I was always a little bit trying to figure out like what makes other kids struggle so much. And though we were poor, my mom and dad did not give us quick foods. We had eggs. I look back now and I'm thinking, wow, for poor people, we actually ate really well. Like a snack in my home was a piece of fruit. There was no purchasing of the processed little packets of things. And when I looked at other kids and started thinking about it, and especially when my children were in school, kids start their morning off with something sugary. Typically, I see parents going to Starbucks nowadays, and I can remember when my kids were in school, moms taking their kids to the Starbucks to get things, and they're drinking the, sugary lattes and whatever, sugary muffin. And then there's no other nutrients until lunchtime comes, and God forbid school lunch. Oh my goodness, Lord help us all. I mean, I got food poisoning from school lunch, so that should tell you. That was in second grade, and it's not gotten better since then. So then they have whatever they're having at lunch, and typically, I can remember at school lunch being like pizza and, all these sloppy joes, nothing good, nothing good. And then they get home from school, and if you were Gen X, you were feral, so there were no parents when you got home. You just ate whatever the heck was there. But, nowadays, there's like a pantry full of, all the chips and all the different things, and it's insane. So they eat that, and then they go into dinner, and then moms were tired. We don't want to really cook things, so it's maybe something bought out again. So I want you to sit back and think of that whole trajectory of your child for that whole day. how much healthy food did they get in? And then you're wondering why they can't focus in class. And we're wondering why their grades are not doing really well and why they're acting out. I mean, it's just, we're asking them to do something that's almost nearly impossible, especially when from birth, we've not given them any solid chance or solid foundation for their brain to even develop properly. Like, it's really very deep if you just take a minute and soak it all in, what we've done to our systems year after year after year. It's amazing that we're still able to perform on any level. That just shows us how amazing our bodies truly are. Like, it can hold on for a long time. They can take a lot of abuse, unfortunately, because we definitely just keep abusing it. But we can't expect our kids to function well if we're not feeding them well. And so if you've got children at home, you need to change this process. As Americans, we are brainwashed, and I mean brainwashed, to think that we have to have all of these snacks, Capri Suns and goldfish and, chips and you name it. Like, that is what we tend to go to for snacks. Like, those things didn't exist. When I was a child, a lot of those things didn't even exist. So they're not necessary. We don't have to have them. Now, I'm not saying don't give your kids snacks, right? But I am saying maybe they shouldn't have those things every day. Maybe it should be like a treat given on the weekend. I mean, nowadays I see parents giving snacks just for kids to shut up. That's that's horrible. Now knowing what it's doing to their little brains that are still developing. Just think about that. Like, if you have a kid that's wild and rambunctious, some of it might be their personality, but some of it might be the fact that they've just been devoid of nutrients since, 11, 12 months go forward because they've had nothing but junk. Um, so I want you to really take some time and examine that, because to know that there are studies that show depression in children as young as 2 years old is insane to me. To know that there is such a high prevalence of children committing suicide under the age of 10, I don't even understand how we got to a place of that. Like, what is happening in a 10-year-old's life to make them want to commit suicide? What happens in a 10-year-old's life to be able to calculate wanting to commit suicide? And so we have to start really looking at some of the factors in all of this. Now, I'm not saying nutrition is the end all be all, right? That's a portion of it, because we also have what? Social media, which kids as young as 5 and 6, they have. So there's also training of the brain through that, whether it be positive or negative, depending on what you let your child consume. They're always on these video games. When I had video games, it was like Donkey Kong and Frogger, and you know what? Those were, even, I think back, they were slightly violent, because the Donkey Kong guy would like bash you on the head. And the Frogger was a poor frog trying to cross the street, and he was getting run over and splat everywhere. So I'm not sure if that was great for our brains either. But nowadays you can play games where you can really steal cars and shoot people in the head, like and see the blood fly out. Like, these are the type of games that young children are playing now. So you put poor nutrition in, which creates poor brain function, and desensitize them to emotions and feelings by way of video games and social media. What do we expect? And this also just goes for at teenagers and adults as well. Like, we are creating the environment that we are sitting in now, and a portion of it is our control. And the one thing that's constant for sure is that we all have to eat every single day. We don't have to be on our phones every day. We don't have to play video games every day, but we do have to eat every day. So I really want to, um, you know, I implore you to take a moment and really start to take your health more serious, especially your brain health, because it's directly correlated to your mental health. And for me, going through the studies was very eye-opening. I eat very well. I'm one of those people that, well, I have a lot more knowledge than most. And so hence this podcast, so I can share it. But I'm always very analytical on how one thing affects the next. So um, I've always been aware that, whatever I put in my mouth is going to have some effect on something. But really diving into these studies and looking at them like gave me a reawakening of how important it is that I need to take care of this. I mean, we all want to live long. I said this, I think, in my last podcast, like we want these fancy cars and the nice clothes and, take all these great vacations. If you're not healthy, how are you going to do that? If your brain function is poor, you're feeling sad, you're on the best vacation of your life and you still feel sad, like that's tragic. That's no way to live. Or you're having thoughts of killing yourself each and every day. And so you drown yourself in a bucket of ice cream and potato chips and then wonder maybe why you're feeling even worse the next day. It's because of what we're putting in our bodies. We're not allowing it to heal. We're not giving it anything to thrive off of. We're not even giving it anything for the medication to work off of. And to be quite honest, again, not telling anyone to stop taking their medication, but one of the studies showed that some antidepressants, not all, but some of them, and some popular ones on the market, actually led to lowering BDNF levels in the body, which are directly correlated to depression, PTSD, bipolar disorder, etc. So you even want to be careful with some of your antidepressants. If you're maybe not feeling like it's working for you, you need to talk to your doctor about switching you to something else, in addition to changing your nutritional protocol. The Mediterranean diet, like I said, seems to be the creme de la creme. And what I know of the Mediterranean diet, because I've eaten that way for quite some time, is it's very tasty. So it's not one of those nutritional protocols where you're like, ugh, healthy, yuck. It's actually really good, very savory foods, heavy on oils, and you can make different sauces and dips out of it if that's kind of your thing. So it's definitely something you want to explore. If you need help trying to figure that out, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help setting you up with a nutrition plan to get you into some better health. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put a link in the description below that is going to give you access to a 60-day mental health reset nutritional protocol that I'm going to give out. It's going to cost $5. So I'll make sure to drop that link in the description box below because I want everybody to have access to at least getting on track to really creating some, better nutrients going to the brain. I feel very passionate about this, and I'm hoping that I'm getting the point across on how critical this all is. So again, I really want everyone to wake up. Don't be brainwashed. You do not need to have processed foods. What you do need to have is, I'm just going to say it, stop being lazy. Take time to take care of yourself 100%. It really, the buck stops with us, and it always has. In addition to, clearly, we're never going to be given all of the knowledge that we need that they know to give us. So you're going to have to start to take some time out and really do some education and figure out what's really happening in your body, in your brain, how it functions, so that you can understand how to better manage yourself. We need to stop relying on other people's education to get somewhere. I mean, it's good to a certain extent. Like, I'm educated in a lot of things and I'm able to give this information to you, but I really want you to take that mantle after I give you some of this and start sitting down and doing some more research so that you can figure out what's going to be a great path for you, because that's the only way that's going to get yourself to a better space, right? So I think that that's going to be critical, that we really just start paying attention to ourselves and taking care of ourselves, because no one's going to give us the knowledge. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but after going through these studies, I'll tell you what I did find, that we are two things in society. and especially in American culture. And there definitely is a caste system in American culture. And we're both a consumer and the product. We consume things and we are sold for things. And I firmly believe that them not giving us this knowledge about with mental health, all that's going on right now in society with mental health, it's like the big buzzword of the last decade and even more increasingly every year. There's no mainstream media saying, hey, diet has been correlated directly, high inflammatory diet has been directly correlated to higher instances of depression, bipolar disorder, ADHD, and anxiety, especially in children. No one is saying this. Well, why not? Well, because there's so much money made now in big pharma with the medications, antidepressants, and things like Ritalin for your ADHD. And why would we tell you? Why would they tell us, right? Then we won't buy their things maybe as much. So that becomes problematic because that is a large chunk. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars of revenue that is just dried up. And I don't think it would dry up that quickly, in all honesty, because I know, unfortunately, people would rather pop a pill than do the work. But that's their thought process. If we gave them so much knowledge, they'd use it. And then the elites who make said things won't have that money. And my mom used to always say, money's the root of all evil. And I'm starting to look at this particular bigger picture and I'm like, wow, like we're just big pawns in this game when it comes to this. I mean, it's sad to know that maybe some people's lives could have been saved if they had eaten better in addition to their medication and their therapy. But that missing link is just not there. And their brain function is declined. And that's just I find it very sad. It's a little heartbreaking to me, to be quite honest. So we have to do better in taking care of our children. We have to do better in taking care of ourselves. It starts with us, people. It starts with us. We have to get away from this Western diet. It's not doing any of us any justice across the board in the world, in the entire world. Everyone that's eating this Western style diet is suffering from high instances of mental health illness. So we've got to take charge. We got to take charge. And so I'm hoping that this podcast drops some little nuggets in there for you to kind of pour some seeds into the brain and you water them further to kind of, look at things and figure it all out. But let's start eating better. So I hope this resonates with everyone. This is what I have for you today on the Do It Anyway podcast. Thank you for joining me on this episode. A bit more serious, but mental health is a serious topic. And I hear everyone talking about it from the aspect of therapy. I think we're starting to trend slightly down from medication only, and it's big on therapy. I think therapy is phenomenal. But if you're in therapy and your brain's not even functioning to take in everything that's being told to you at therapy, I beg to ask the question, are we even able to implement what we're supposed to be getting at therapy? Does it even resonate? Or is this just now becoming the next big money grab, right? We've got big pharma. Now we've got therapists say, hey, sit on my couch for an hour and let's just talk it out. So I don't know. I posed that question to you. I want you to take some time and think about it. So that's the episode for you today. This is episode 5. Again, we're talking about mental health, and I'll leave you with that. Please be sure to check out this episode and our past episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. And I look forward to seeing you next week for episode 6. I want you guys to take care of yourself and take care of your mental health. If you're struggling, find someone to talk to and start putting nutrients in their body. Talk to you all soon. Peace.